I will call to order the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting for Wednesday, January 25th. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have roll call, please, Ms. Navarez?
Chair Longstreet.
Here.
Vice Chair Clark. Here. Commissioner Wiscombe. Commissioner Cavazos. Commissioner Lesner-Buxton. Here. Commissioner Martinez-Cohen. Commissioner Armbruster.
Here. Okay. Is this a time, Ms. Zachary, we should welcome our new commissioner?
Yes, Chair Longstreet, if you would like to do the honors.
We have a new member tonight. Tara Armbruster is joining us, and we welcome her aboard for her first meeting. Do you have anything you want to say? Or you? Okay. We won't put you on the spot. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, we don't.
Okay. Any written communications? Public comment. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the Commission. The total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. And we do have Mr. Cox, Michael Cox. Would you like to come on?
Thank you. I'm here to address the issue of the meals in the park that several people tend to during the week and other stuff, and I feel that we should continue to fund it somehow, or try to get somehow work to try to better it, or to work some kind of thing out where we won't lose it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we have no other public comment, so we will conclude. I think the other ones are for agenda items, 4 and 4A. Okay, so that concludes public comment. Do we have a youth council report? I do not believe we do today.
Chair Longstreet, no, we do not have a youth council report today.
Okay. So we will move on to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. Ms. Martinez-Cohen, do you have anything to report? We'll just start at that end.
I was not able to attend the Arts and Crafts Committee meeting this month. However, I did review the minutes. It looks like they're going to be electing a new committee member, working on some marketing plans, and also the space assignment process is going to be going online. They're going to be piloting that program.
Oh, good.
And they're anticipating some changes with the bridge, completion of the bridge project, and there was some reassignment of spaces, and there was a conflict about that. But that was about all. It was a very productive meeting, but that was about all.
Thank you. And I know Ms. Armbruster hasn't been assigned anything yet. Ms. Clark.
This morning, I attended a ribbon cutting at the Upper Arroyo Borough Restoration Project at Barger Canyon. A little background on the project: the city completed construction of this restoration project after purchasing 14 acres of land with Measure B funding, and they restored 5.95 acres of creek habitat, including removing concrete and debris, widening the creek, constructing a new seasonal wetland, and planting over 4,500 riparian plants and trees. Another side effect of the project, it will increase groundwater recharge in the Foothill Basin. So I think this project is an excellent example of what the city does with Measure B funding in terms of promoting land stewardship and protecting our resources for now and future generations.
Thank
That's all
you.
I have.
Mr. Lesner-Buxton.
I attended the neighborhood advisory committee. Nothing to report at this time.
Okay, and I also attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council where we received the report on the youth programming that is out at Franklin and the funding for it and the grants that they're going for, and the ribbon cutting today, and it's a beautiful project. Unfortunately, it's not a project that's open to the public. It doesn't have access, but it is going to be a great benefit to the Arroyo Borough watershed. So, Commission staff communications, ceremonial items.
Chair Longstreet and members of the Commission, we had 2 department staff receive recognition at City Council this month. Liz Smith, who's the Creek's Outreach Coordinator, got her 10-year service award. And Steve Palacio, who's a senior grounds maintenance worker, got a 30-year pin of service with the city.
Excellent. We congratulate them both. Doesn't seem like the Creeks Division has been around 10 years. Now we move on to consent items. We have the minutes for December 21st. We've all had time to review those. Are there any changes to the minutes? Would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
And this
I'll second.
second, okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. And that brings us to the street tree advisory items.
Chair Wiscombe or Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, excuse me. The first item is the Las Positas MODOC multi-use path project. The Public Works Department is proposing a project to install bike lanes and pedestrian access adjacent to MODOC Road and Las Positas roads to separate that use away from the roadways where vehicles travel. The project begins at MODOC and Calle de los Amigos and travels east along MODOC to Las Positas and then down Las Positas down to Cliff Drive. In order to create space for the bike path, it necessitates removal of several trees. This is a slide that shows where the project is occurring. The construction will require removal of most of the trees. There are some trees that they will attempt to preserve if at construction time they can work the details to avoid those trees, they will do so. The project is proposing to remove up to 114 trees. Of those, 47 are coast live oaks, and the remainder are other species of trees. The project is also proposing to replace the coast live oaks at a 5-to-1 ratio and other species at a 2-to-1 ratio, which would mean up to 369 replacement trees. The committee reviewed the project and did a tour of the site visit, and their recommendation is to approve the removals on the condition that the replacement trees include a diversity in size of planted trees up to and including 60-inch box trees, and that all the replacement trees within the construction area be native trees and have a diversity of species as well. The project anticipates being able to plant 50 replacement trees within the project, and the remainder of the mitigation trees would go up in the Barger Canyon, the next phases of the Barger Canyon project. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to discuss the project a little further.
Good afternoon, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. I'm Ashley Shue with the City's Public Works Department. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of the project, and then I'm going to let Jessica Grant, project planner with the city's planning division, talk a little bit about where we are within the environmental process and what the next steps are. So as Tim described, this project starts on Modoc Road at Calle de los Amigos and continues toward Las Positas Road and then continues down Las Positas Road to Cliff Drive. This is a 2.6 mile long corridor, and it provides connectivity to the city's crosstown bike route as well as the coastal bike routes. So it's of regional importance as well as local importance. It will provide connectivity to the adjacent neighborhoods, to schools, to Elings Park, Arroyo Burro Park, and the Douglas Family Preserve, and various other destinations along the route. So the Public Works Department was successful in obtaining just under $1.4 million in active transportation program grant funds for the environmental and design phases of the project. We received that funding in 2014 and have been proceeding with concept design and environmental. And the purpose of that program is to increase the number of trips by walking and bicycling and to improve safety for non-motorized users, as well as to achieve greenhouse gas reduction goals and enhance public health and benefit disadvantaged communities along the route. We don't currently have construction funding identified. We did apply for the most recent cycle of active transportation program grant funding this past June, and the project wasn't successful this time around, but once we have a project that has cleared environmental and is through final design, will be a more competitive project for future grant opportunities, and we're going to continue pursuing those grant opportunities to fund construction. So as Tim mentioned, there are a number of trees along the corridor that will be impacted by this project. At the level of design that we're at currently, which is a concept design, this 114 trees is considered a worst-case scenario. So once we get into more detailed design and get into detailed grading, we'll be able to identify any trees that could potentially be saved. And then in addition, once we get into construction, which at this point there is no time frame for, there may be certain trees that we may be able to preserve during construction. And we are proposing to replace the coast live oaks at a ratio of 5-1 and the non-natives at 2-1. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to give a more detailed description of where we're at in the environmental process.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. Tim, if you wouldn't mind hitting the slides, as Ashley was just reviewing, this is the project area, and go to the next slide. This just shows the regional context of the proposed project as it connects to the larger regional area and basically would help connect to UCSB and then all the way to the future visioning for SBCC as well. The next slide. So where this project's at in the process, circled right here is, I don't have the mouse. Thank you. Is today for the tree removal. But leading up to this tree removal hearing, this project has been in the process for at least a couple years. The actual project concept has been around since the 70s in various planning documents from Capital Improvement Program and City's Bike Master Plan. As Ashley mentioned, in 2014, this project concept became more real because Las Positas, which had been owned a certain section by Caltrans, was relinquished to the city, which gave us flexibility to design in the right-of-way. So that was analyzed in 2014. And later on, we applied for the grant application and received funding for design and environmental review. and then that basically initiated just further review of the project and an actual, it says DART application there, but a development application review team, which became the actual project description and details for the project. In December, November, there was the draft mitigated ND that was released for the environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. And that went through a 30-day period. During that time, Planning Commission reviewed. There was an environmental hearing at Planning Commission. And then the next step after this process for the Parks and Rec would be for the project to be the environmental document to be considered for adoption, and that's coming up on February 9th. And then a portion of the project is in the coastal zone, so a portion of the project is required to receive a coastal development permit. And then following Planning Commission action, the next steps is for the project to proceed to final design, and then it would need to go back to the Architectural Board of Review for review and approval of the design, and then we'd go through building permits. So just wanted to kind of see where all the pieces fit for this project. There urgency now are for review for the adoption of the mitigated negative declaration that's happening in February. This is all based upon the existing grant milestones that the project does need to have environmental review by a certain date. And once that's received, then that's the Caltrans blessing, which oversees the grant application for the project to move into final design. So as Ashley was mentioning, this 114 trees right now, that is sort of the worst case scenario. But once the project goes into the next phase, we'll be able to understand better if any of those trees can be saved.
So, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, just to wrap up the discussion, the purpose of today's meeting is to review the tree removals. The Street Tree Advisory Committee is recommending approval of all 114 on the condition that replacement trees within the project include the diversity of size up to and including 60-inch box, and the replacement trees focus on native trees and diversity of native trees.
Thank you. Right now are there questions from the commission? We'll do just questions now, then we'll open public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the commission. So, any questions? You won't do any removals, nothing happens until it is a fully funded project. Is that correct?
That's
right?
correct. We wouldn't plan any tree removals until the construction funding was in hand and scheduled and ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
What is the target date for starting the construction if all goes well according to the nice flow chart here?
Sure. Well, at this time, we don't have a target because we haven't obtained the construction funding.
Mm-hmm.
We plan to finish up final design within the next year to year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point, it could be a shelf-ready project for as soon as we're able to obtain that construction funding. The next cycle for the Active Transportation Program grant is in 2019. So we would plan to apply then, and any other grant opportunities that come up in the meantime, we'll definitely be pursuing. So we don't have an exact time frame, but we'll be finishing design within the next year to year and a half.
Will you be phasing? Is this a project you can phase with partial funding?
Yes, it is, and that's something we could consider for future grant funding opportunities. There's kind of three logical phases. One would be Modoc Road. The second would be from along Las Positas from Cliff Drive up to Veronica Springs, and then the third segment could be between Modoc and Veronica Springs.
Okay.
So we can phase it if that makes it a more competitive project.
Okay, thank you. No more questions? I will open public comment. You have 2 minutes at the podium. We start with Mary Skopatz, and Mary Skopatz will be followed by Marilyn Wales. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And good afternoon, Commissioners. I live there right at that corner where you showed it today. I live at Modoc and Calle de los Amigos. I'm right there. I'm at the narrowest point of where you're talking about this project. Amtrak is on the other side. I don't know if Amtrak has been notified that this is going on. However, for me, there's a privacy matter with taking down any trees, but even more important than that, do all trees have to come down? Is there any kind of looking at the trees to see if they're viable? Excuse me. And there are other issues, but today I'm going to focus on those. The trees themselves, are we keeping any that are still good trees? And the other question is, what can I expect as far as privacy? Noise abatement, which I have now. It's pretty quiet there, even though I have the railroad there and a busy street and 101. But with you removing the trees, and not just the trees, we're talking about they're going to remove all the bushes and all the other foliage around there. I am very concerned, and also because I am at the most narrow part of this whole project. So I would like to know if there's any consideration of not only my property, which is the largest space in La Cumbre Circle condos, or are we just going to have to sit back and take it because it's been funded? I don't know, and I'd like to hear if Amtrak has anything to say. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Marilyn Wales, and Marilyn will be followed by Dan McCarter.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Wales, and I'm the immediate past president of the La Cumbre Owners Association, the same area that Mary is from. Our question is, are you considering all of those oleanders that are along Modoc as part of the 114 trees? The oleanders are about 20 to 30 feet high, and I don't know whether those are under assault or not. It's a continuous hedge that Mary's referring to that provides air pollution control, noise abatement. Also, it screens. We have a large wall along there that at this point, graffiti is painted on the corner because it's visible from Modoc and Calle de los Amigos. If those oleanders are cut down, it's going to expose our whole wall, that's the full length of the north end, to graffiti. It's also worth noting that that is in the 100-year flood zone. We have to pay flood insurance because of that. But mainly it's the noise abatement from, as she said, Modoc and the railroad and 101. And so I would like to know whether those oleanders, there are trees in amongst the oleanders. Oh, and with the city's approval, our association has been keeping those oleanders pruned off of, there's a pathway just to the north between the oleanders and our wall. There is a cement pathway that's owned by the city. But we've been keeping those oleanders pruned from hanging over that pathway so that walkway stays clear. So those are my question. I guess my other comment is there were a number of us that made comments at the December hearing, and I didn't hear about this hearing until I got an email last night because somebody on the board got a notice, and I'm wondering why those of us who made comments about the trees were not ever notified of this hearing.
Okay, thank you. Dan McCarter and The next speaker after Dan McCarter is Ken Balmy.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Parks Commission. I'm Dan McCarter, representing Friends of Arroyo Burro and expressing concern for the Las Positas Valley restoration area at 601 Las Positas Road. There's not a lot of trees in that area along the road, and I'm not sure if there are any that are slated to be removed in this project, specifically as it's not up here. But like I say, there's a few oak trees, especially at the choking area across from the entrance of Elings Park. It takes a long time for these oaks to be established, and we'd rather not see any native vegetation, native trees be removed from that project site. That's at 601 Las Positas Road. I say feel free to remove any of the eucalyptus trees. The palm trees are fair game along the road there, except that hooded orioles do nest in there, and so there's already been a reduction of those birds from the last trimming, but a valuable species in that area. The reason why we don't want the oaks, especially the oaks, removed is because there are species of special concern, protected species in that park, and they rely on the oak trees for their very existence. So we'd appreciate to find another way to do the project without taking out any oak trees there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ken Balmy, and our last speaker will be Shannon O'Brien.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
I appreciate this opportunity to speak on this matter. I'm Ken Balmy. I live on Veronica Place, which is about midway down along Las Positas Road in the project area. My house backs up against the culvert and the road, so this thing will be going on right outside my back fence. I'm concerned for the oak trees in particular, and especially the mature oaks that might be affected by this. It's hard to tell which of the trees in this whole project area might be affected. I don't think that's been specifically addressed in what I've seen. But in the 25 years I've lived there, I've seen a lot of tree species kind of getting decimated up and down that stretch. Several years ago, nearly all the pine trees got infested by a bark boring beetle or something, and most of those are gone. A couple years after that, it was all the Myoporum that's been planted up and down there. Most of that has been wiped out. I've seen I don't recall the name of it, but there's some moth that attacks the oak trees every couple of years. Those have been infested, and they keep coming back. So they're made for this area. I walk that stretch on a daily basis with my dog. Yes, I do clean up after him. And I've seen and heard in the middle of the night cars going off the road from time to time, and the lucky ones run into an oak. I've actually seen the mature oaks holding back cars that would have gone crashing down into the culvert. I've seen other cars that weren't so lucky, didn't hit a mature oak, they hit some other little sapling and just crashed right through, and down they go. So that's, I don't know, a safety feature to consider. But I ride my bike around town quite a bit. Hendry's is one of the best beaches in the world, so I'm in favor of this project in general. I just want it to be approached with caution, and please don't mow down the oaks.
Thank you. Shannon O'Brien.
Hello, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I also live on the same street. Ken is one of my neighbors. And the question I have is, there's got to be a better plan. Unless the mature trees are diseased, dying, or unhealthy, there's no reason to remove them. They've proven that they can survive more than one drought, and there's got to be a better plan. just because funding has come your way doesn't mean you take out what is working and replace. These trees have managed to make it through the drought without the passive watering they've done on Anapamu to save the stone pines. And when new trees are planted, you need to have a lot of water on hand to establish the roots. Are they planning on irrigation? Is there funding to maintain irrigation? Is the reclaimed water going to be used for irrigation? Are they going to use a passive water system like they do for the stone pines? So those are all things to address when you put new plantings in. The other concern I have is the California Transportation Commission looked at the 3 plans for the bike path master plan: the east side, the west side, and the Modoc-Las Positas corridor. The east side and the west side were approved. The Las Positas-Modoc corridor was not. So the fact that there's money to go for the tree removal ahead of money for the construction, I understand you're not doing any tree removal before that's in order, but I have to insist that if California Transportation Commission looked at it once and said, look, it's not necessary, we've got bike paths there, people can get to and from, whereas the east side and west side, they can't. Maybe it's not the best way to spend the funds, and they've already been denied. So I really would like you to reconsider removing any trees that are healthy, and to reconsider if a plan does go through for improving bike path, that going around mature trees is part of the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one more speaker slip that came in. Paul Tonkin.
Hello. I live at 86 Lacumber, so my backyard is on Modoc. And most of the issues that I have been mentioned. I also like to mention I ride my bike a lot. I volunteer at the hospital, and so I go down that bike path, and I also go to the university on my bike. One thing that has been mentioned that I don't know if it was mentioned, I was late, I apologize, is that there are power poles amidst those oleanders and those trees. What are you going to do with the power poles? Are they going to stay there? Are they going to be moved? What's the plan with those? Also, there is a swale which drains some of the rear parts of the property in Lacumber Circle and drains the water off. And I'm hoping that whatever you're planning on doing, you're going to take into consideration some of those things, because there's maybe as much as 5 feet from the crest of the highway to maybe the bottom of the swale, and the swale is like right up against where our wall is in the Lacumber Circle. So I have not seen the plans, and I would like to see them, and I'd like some of these things to be considered. Everybody else has mentioned most of the other items that I would have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I will close public comment, and it is back to the Commission for deliberations. Comments? Questions? Anybody?
Yeah,
Ms. Martinez.
I'd be interested to hear from either the engineer or the planner on what's your feedback from what you just heard from some of these questions and concerns.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Longstreet and Commissioner. Yes, I'll run through the list of items. So the first one, actually, the last time we've had a public touch point before this meeting was on the draft mitigated ND, and one of the neighbors was correct. There was a public comment period from November 22nd to December 22nd, and public comment was received, and as well as from the Planning Commission. We did not receive any other agency feedback during that period. But leading up to the February 9th meeting is when staff has the official response to public comment, and that will be available online in detail of a lot of some of the concerns that we heard today. but I do want to address some of those items. So the first one with the oleander hedge, there is an oleander hedge. Ashley, if you show, or Tim, with the mouse, it is right near the intersection of Calle de los Amigos and Modoc that is behind like the La Cumbre Circle neighborhood. So the short answer is we will be removing some of that hedge, and some of it will remain. Again, the project is solely in city right-of-way, but the grade from where the path is proposed does take a dip. So the oleander roots that are right next to the path, those would be removed. But a little bit down lower on the slope, the oleander hedge would remain. Whatever is removed, the project is proposing to put back either additional oleander hedge or some sort of screening. So a screening will still continue to exist. The wall that is in behind the oleander hedge will remain. Let's see. The question about 601 Las Positas Road, Tim, if you highlight just on the map showing the approximate location, Mr. McCarter was referring to a city-owned 6-acre parcel that is adjacent to the proposed project. Again, this project is solely in city right-of-way, so any tree removal is within the right-of-way. And as we mentioned, the project would have plans to mitigate for the trees up to 362 trees. There would be about 50 trees along that right-of-way of Coast Live Oaks that would be planted. There might be some additional planting opportunities in the future that we will continue to work with Parks and Rec staff, kind of on the perimeter right where the city park touches the right-of-way. There's capital projects that are going on with the on those properties, and it's just a continued discussion to make sure that there are synergies between those. The other location, the Veronica Place, it's between Las Positas Place and Veronica Place. As Mr. Balmy mentioned, there's an existing culvert. So they are correct, those neighbors, that a lot of the proposed oak tree removals are proposed in that section. Reason being, there is also in that same area a proposed restoration project by Parks and Rec that are proposing to remove the concrete culvert and make it a naturalized channel. And then there's going to be a big restoration associated with that project that we are not including in this project's restoration. So the future of that area is going to be very naturalized. Again, this is a section, if the oak trees are closer to the road, then we're trying to save those trees, but from an environmental standpoint, you still have to look at worst case scenario potential loss. But that's something in detail and final design that we would address. Ashley, did I miss anything? I think
the question about the power poles along near Calle de los Amigos, we're not planning on needing to relocate those power poles. The pathway won't affect the location of those poles, including the drainage near that existing wall. None of that will be changed, and we'll have to address drainage from the pathway toward the road as part of our plans and meeting stormwater requirements as well.
Okay. And then one more thing, as far as future noticing, neighbors in this room will be receiving another notice. It actually was mailed out today. They should be receiving it by Monday, notifying them of the upcoming Planning Commission hearing. So if they want to stay tuned or be present at that meeting, that's the meeting to go to. And then all of the project plans are available on the city's website, as well as the staff report and public response to comments in the environmental documents section of our website right now. And then there will be a staff report posted on February 2nd.
Thank you. I would just like to say that this commission did receive a complete presentation along with the Creeks Division, or the Creeks Committee, about this project. And when we received that, the project received favorable comments. There was a lot of discussion. I think sometimes the city process seems a little bit like cart before the horse, but for them to go forward, these trees have to be approved to get to final design. So for them to take it through the environmental document process and all of that. So I trust that 114 trees won't come out. I mean, that this project, once it goes to final design, will be able, and I think that would be our comment on it, I'm sure from all of the commissioners, that, you know, we save as many trees as we can. But I think it's a very important project for access for the community. To me, it is part of the West Side bike path. This is coming through Elings Park and getting safely to the beach. It is an important piece. So I support this project. The idea of 114 trees is pretty hard for any of us to swallow because we discuss trees one at a time at this commission. But things have to march on sometimes, and this is a safety project. I think some of the things that Mr. Balmy said about the cars when we have a separation, hopefully we'll be able to prevent some of those accidents and some of the stuff that we see happening on Las Positas. So I am in support of this project. Are there other comments or?
I agree with much of what you said. I think I don't want to see trees grow. I live in the neighborhood, but I think the benefits of the connectivity and the benefits to our environment with less people driving their cars, more on their bikes, the benefits to public health, and the benefits to, there's a whole segment that can't get, up Las Positas to the beach. They can't get to any area they're from the San Roque area. And I was friends with a woman who was hit on MoDOC 7 years ago and killed by a drunk driver when she was running in a supposedly safe path. So I think that this is an essential component of our bike path. And I also trust that the Parks Department or city will not take out all 114 trees.
Ms. Martinez-Cohen?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one other thing. You had mentioned different sizes. So I'm assuming that there's lots of different sizes of trees that would be replaced so that they would be the same size and stature and provide that same type of protection from the tree. Is that the intention as well, is to try to replace it with the right size item?
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Cohen, the project was already proposing different size trees to be placed. The Street Tree Advisory Committee recommended some even larger trees than they were already proposing for just that reason, so that there would be that natural look to the project, so that they have varying sizes of trees. And we'll work closely with engineering and community development to determine maybe the best locations for the larger trees if they get approval for that.
Other comments? Do we have a motion? Anybody prepared to make a motion? Ms. Clark.
I'd like to make a motion that the commission recommend that the trees be approved for removal on condition that the replacement trees have diversity of size up to and including 60-inch box within the limits of the project, and that the replacement trees focus on native species. I would also like to add in the caveat that you do minimize the amount of trees that are removed to the extent possible. And that's it.
would you consider adding in that no trees are removed till funding's, just to have it memorialized?
And
till
that
funding's.
no trees are removed until construction funding is guaranteed.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Go forward. Good luck with funding.
Thank you.
I do believe it'll be a few years before we see any evidence of this project. I'm sorry to say, with our current funding. That brings us to, and thank you all for coming, to item 4B. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the tree at 379 Cannon Drive is a relatively young Italian stone pine. The owner of the property is in the middle of revitalizing the property. There's been tenants in the property for a period of time, and it hasn't been managed, so they're upgrading the property. Part of that, they would like to redo some of the landscaping. In fact, they've already installed some of the hedges that they mentioned in their application. The concern is, although this tree isn't within the wildland fire protected area, it's close to that border. And if a wildfire should come down from the wildfire area through that neighborhood, this tree is pretty close to the house and provides a significant fuel source for that event should it occur. The committee reviewed the application and the request, and on a split vote, they determined that that there would be less impact to the neighborhood if this tree were removed at this size and replaced than if it were allowed to get big and then removed at that time. So their recommendation on a 4-to-1 vote is to approve the removal on the condition the tree is replaced with a tree that can achieve 25 feet in height.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions? I have a question. I was out there today, and they have oaks on either side. Is there, what kind of a tree are we talking about them wanting replanted there? And it almost doesn't appear to have room for another tree.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the proposal is for a small flowering tree, which can achieve, both of their proposed trees can achieve that height. The setback is 30 feet on this property, and although it wouldn't be exactly in this location, in fact, the committee mentioned that small oak would receive benefit from the removal of pine so it could get some more sunlight. But there's locations, they've got an existing vegetable garden close to there. That's a potential location. The property goes on around the corner. There's opportunities around that side. So there's plenty of opportunity for a tree of that size.
Okay. All right. It just looked pretty vegetated to me. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? A motion to this item?
I'll make a motion to conditionally approve the removal based on the replacement with the potential tree to reach 25 feet.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Downey. Ms. Zachary, I noticed that I skipped something. I skipped the summary of council actions. Was there any comments on that from anyone? No? Okay. Then we'll move to the director's report.
Chair Longstreet, members of the commission, I'm going to go through the director's report. There are a couple of items that I am going to float, but we will follow up with you with more detail related to scheduling some work sessions and some site visits. We want to use today's meeting as an opportunity to do that. First of all, I'd like to let the Commission know that we submitted a grant proposal to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection for the purpose of planting up to 650 trees and removing parkway hardscape in certain areas of the city. The opportunity to apply for these grant funds came up fairly short notice, and in talking to folks at CAL FIRE, we determined we had some eligibility. I don't remember exactly how much money is available statewide, but we thought we would go big with the idea that if we got all of the funding, it would be great, and if we got partial funding, that would be great too. Commissioners are well aware that we've been challenged with having resources to plant trees. We've also done a lot of work over the years to better understand where our vacancies are, where our tree conflicts are, and also where we can enhance street parkways so that trees can survive more readily. So areas that are full of concrete or rock or other materials that inhibit a tree's ability to grow. This is a three-part process, so we're just telling you about the first thing we did, which was submit the concept proposal, sort of the pre-proposal phase. Then we have to go through another phase, and then they have to pick us, and then we have to go through the contract phase. So it takes some time, but we're very excited about it, and we'll keep you up to date. Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Clark mentioned the ribbon-cutting ceremony that we had today for a very exciting creek restoration project. And although the property is not open for regular public use, I do know the Creeks Division is going to be planning both planting and work days and then also field trips. And there's a lot of interest in the ecological community to be involved in that project. So we'll also keep you up to date on opportunities to go out and visit the site as it progresses and grows in. Chase Palm Park restroom renovation. Those of you that frequent the beachfront area have been noticing a chain link fence around that restroom for a very long time. The project is almost done. It's been held up because of the gate delivery that we received wasn't to plan, so it has to be redone, but we hope that it'll be opening very soon in the near future. I'd like to add, and it's not in the report, if you happen to walk by Los Baños or you use the pool, as some of our commissioners do, we just finished today a project to put in bike racks in front of the facility. And I'd just like to acknowledge that was a great teamwork on the part of all staff in the division involved with operating the pool. We actually poured the concrete. The bicycle poles got reused from another source. They were in storage in Public Works, and then our Parks Division staff designed and installed the landscape. So that was an internal project that we got done. Part of the reason why is a great project for us to work on. We also redid the irrigation. Also because we're finding at times it's a lot more cost effective if we just do the project ourselves rather than contract it out, because the cost of project construction continues to grow faster than we would like it to. The Cabrillo Pavilion and Bathhouse renovation, this will be a stop on your site visit, particularly since we have some new commissioners. We're in full swing in building permit plan check and building permit review and plan check, and we're hoping to be out of that process in March, which means we'll be gearing up to developing construction documents to go out to bid, with the idea that we will be building that facility starting in January 2018. The Park Foundation has chosen to make it its focus for this year and probably be its focus for next year if we have any luck. And we're looking forward to fundraising at the local level, also pursuing grant funds, both at the local and state level. And then I'd also like to announce that the Santa Barbara Triathlon has selected the building renovation project, and the Park Foundation is the beneficiary for this year's triathlon. So we're working really closely with triathlon organizers to raise funds for the project through that. Smoking ordinance update. That's something that's going to the ordinance committee in January, and it'll be coming to the commission at your February meeting. Besides, it's addressing a number of areas within the city, but of interest, particular interest to you, is in parks and recreation facilities. We'll be bringing back some recommendations to expand smoking bans in our parks and recreation facilities, and then also discussion about what to do at the golf course, since it's a different situation there in terms of a lot of open space where there aren't a lot of people in contact with each other. On Tuesday, the council also began looking at alcohol policy issues, and the council gave staff direction to go to the ordinance committee to look at regulatory options for off-site sale of alcohol, and that's essentially the convenience stores, the supermarkets, and as a way to look at an opportunities for more land use control, so the city has more decision making in terms of the number, location, and also rules around operating an off-sale alcohol facility. That's of interest to our department since oftentimes alcohol can be brought into a park and can lead to behaviors that are less than productive. We'll be bringing that to the commission as well. And then two more things. As many of you have been following, the City Council's been looking very closely at our infrastructure needs citywide. It's been a discussion for many, many years. It's been ramping up over the last couple of years, and next Tuesday the City Council will be hearing some staff recommendations on how to proceed with looking at options for raising funds to support infrastructure financing, and we'll be bringing that back to the Commission as well. We had a lot of rain last weekend, and so I just thought I'd give you an update. We did just great. We were worried about the bird refuge, but it was draining to the ocean, so that's a good thing. We also lost 6 city trees, and if you remember or you're familiar with the stone pines along Santa Barbara Junior High and Quarantina Street, we lost a very large one right by the junior high on Coda Street, surprisingly. And we also, that's one park tree we lost. We also lost Monterey cypress in the Douglas Family Preserve. But we had staff on all weekend working, making sure everything moved forward, despite the fact that we had significant rain, and I think we came through it pretty well. Then lastly, we have upcoming commission agenda items. I mentioned that we wanted to do some site visits. We have before the commission, either in the February meeting or perhaps not till the March meeting, a discussion of the what's called the transition area. If you're familiar with Chase Palm Park and you've seen that green fence that's been there for a really long time, there is a privately owned property next to the park where a hotel will be developed in the very near future. Between that property line and our park is actual parkland that's been called out as a transition area between the hotel and the park, and it's been sort of sitting there in limbo waiting for the hotel design to be complete. We've been working with the project applicants regarding what kind of landscape plan would go in there. This is something of interest to the commission, has been for a number of years, perhaps 20 at this point, since it was initially discussed back when Chase Palm Park, the expansion, was developed. Working with them to identify, they've been proposing their landscape elements, how that integrates with the park and how it integrates with people's use of the park. We'll be bringing that to the commission beginning in February, or it may just be in March, because in addition, from a concept standpoint, you don't have any decision-making authority over that landscape, but there are a number of tree issues, as you've discovered in your recent item, that you will have to review and take action on for that landscape plan to move forward. So there's that. We did have our park and recreation facility use and misuse report before the commission in December. We intended to bring it back this meeting. We're going to bring it back to you in February. We actually had a meeting with a number of the meal service providers and other service providers last week. We want to be able to integrate the outcome of that meeting into the report, and then also some other next steps. So you'll be seeing that. And then lastly, we have a couple of ideas for tours and site visits as well as work sessions. So throwing this all out at you, the commission, as a matter of practice, has done site tours specific to projects that are moving forward. But then also, when we've had new commissioners come on board, we've actually gone around the city and picked key areas just to orient you to the issues that we're addressing and or the capital projects that we might be pursuing. We'd like to schedule something like that in March, and we're toying with a couple of ideas. So if you could just keep them in mind for now, either a Saturday, which means it is time out of another volunteer opportunity, perhaps for 4 hours. We'd be sure to feed you and we'd transport you and that kind of thing. Or we could pick some lunch hours, for example, during the week, but many of you work, and that might be challenging to achieve. While the days are still short, we're sort of limited in doing it after hours. So we often look at Wednesdays, since you already know one Wednesday a month you're committed to this meeting as an opportunity. We try to do things nearer to the end of the day to accommodate people's work schedules. Would like you to consider, if you're asked to be available on a Saturday, if that fits in with your personal life. And then we would like to also do a work session around our upcoming budget cycle. So every year the city does a 2-year financial plan. We're in the second year of one this year. We've got another 2-year one coming up. We anticipate there'll be a number of changes in our department proposal. And again, we have new commissioners that have never been through budget review, and sometimes it can be a little overwhelming to try to get through in one meeting. A work session gives you the opportunity to sort of dig in a little bit, ask questions, and then it gives us the opportunity to make sure we come back with answers to your questions. And we also really do value your input and discussion around some of the key decisions that we might be making going into the next 2-year cycle. The budget itself is presented to council in mid-April, so that work session would be April. So we don't want to bombard you with 4 different things to do in February and March, but think about February, March, April. We will be asking for a little bit more of your time to work through some of the business of the department.
Thank you. And I strongly recommend that we do these activities because it helps to give perspective to the budget if we've done some site visits, if you understand sort of why we're doing what we're doing. And sometimes up here there's not enough time for that. So I hope you can all make time in your schedule for these events. The other thing I'd like to say before Mr. Downey leaves is thank you. I lost a street tree in front of my house Christmas Eve day, and it went down and blocked us in. And I would like to say that the staff did a great job and really appreciate all the different departments that came. We had the fire department, public works, the police department, and our trees crew. But he did a great job freeing us from the driveway, and it was sad to see the tree go, but it just failed. So thank you. Any questions on any of the items in the director's report or comments? Thank you, Ms. Zachary. And now we are on to our playground program report.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Park Supervisor Ken Brown, who is our resident departmental playground expert, is going to give this presentation. Again, it's along the lines of we do this, every couple of years, particularly when we have new commissioners, and then we also have things that we're always working on. It's a good opportunity to bring you up to date. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Good evening, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. Thank you for your time to address this. It's a really important and enjoyable part of our job. If there's any topic that's quite nice to talk about, it's play and playgrounds. We have a fairly robust playground program here, and it's kind of it's something that touches everybody. Everybody played as a child. Everybody remembers it fondly, and it's kind of my job not to turn that into cold, hard science. I'm going to try and keep some magic about it and make it enjoyable. Fred Rogers once said that people often talk about play as being a relief from serious work, but for children, play is serious work. So we want to continue in that vein. This is a definition of a playground. It's often odd to think that you have to define one, but there is a lot of different ideas out there, and this is an amalgam of a number of different definitions. A playground is a play space provided for children to develop physically, mentally, socially, and engineered to reduce the chances of a debilitating or life-threatening injury. It is important to note that it's not just physical acumen that we're trying for children. They develop socially, they develop mentally, they develop in almost every way when they play. We have 22 playgrounds in the park system. That's a fairly stable number. It's changed only once since I've been here. It tends to be the number that we've got in each of our parks. This particular playground shown here is at Stevens. It's a fairly recent installation. It's really kind of the highlight of the park. As you walk in, it takes up a fair bit of room and is right in front of you. So often that's the case. In some parks, really the playground is the majority of the park. In other parks, it's only a small part. But it's often an important part for the children one way or another. The value of playgrounds. City streets are unsatisfactory playgrounds for children. Older children who would play vigorous games must have places especially set aside for them. That's a Theodore Roosevelt quote. Obviously, back then, he wasn't so concerned with childhood obesity, but it is a thing now. It's often presented as one of the main reasons to try and get children to stop being sedentary, to get out and to play. It also helps them with problem solving. As I said before, they apply everything that they've learned in more traditional school setting when they're playing and when they're playing with each other. It develops teamwork, something that we want to make sure that children develop as well. That's why it's good to have children playing together, playing with adults, playing with other children, and doing it in a group setting. The history of playgrounds. Obviously, there's never been a time when children haven't played, and there's never been a time when they haven't played with things and in areas where they lived. There are ancient ruins that they've excavated and found children's play areas. It's been around for a very long time. For our purposes here, it really started in the late 1800s, early 1900s. As the population grew closer to cities and urban centers, there was obviously not a safe place for children to play. So a number of groups started pushing toward setting aside areas for children to play. This particular photo obviously has made its way around the internet and other ones like it a number of times. That is a true playground. If you check Snopes, it was verified as it's a real picture of a real playground and real children playing on it. Obviously, that wouldn't pass pretty much any regulation now, but it shows that children have been playing on structures since as long as we've been building them. The design of playgrounds. We deal with a number of different firms that help us design our playgrounds. We come up with rough ideas of what we would like, and they give us presentations of the different options. They give us quite a bit of information, not only detailed plan views, but 3Ds, often with live photographs behind it of our sites, and they help us out really to nail down the particulars of what we want in a playground. They're generally designed for an age group, usually 2 to 5 years old or 5 to 12 years old. The structures are different for those different ages because generally from 2 to 5 they haven't developed any upper body strength. The children's heads are still much larger than their bodies, so there's some regulatory issues there. It straddles 5-year-olds because generally right about 5 is when they start to develop a lot of upper body strength and they can handle more above overhead types of items. Most of the designs now are modular, meaning they have thousands of pieces and they can put them together almost any way they want. So there's really an almost endless supply of designs that they can operate. Of the designs, sometimes they're themed. As you see here, this is Chase Palm Park. There's obviously a shipwreck theme. It's been there since the original playground was built. It helps to define a site. It helps to determine which direction we go. In this case, we've also recently replaced this, which we'll talk about in a bit. Themes are often helpful for adults, sometimes even more so than children. It helps design directions. It helps with the aesthetics of the site. Often children will play according to the theme that we design, but then when they get bored with it, they're going to make up their own themes. So oftentimes children are just more interested in playing than they are with a particular theme play, but it still helps to define a site and get the work done. Some of the design issues are compatibility with the site. We look to a site to see and inform us about what kind of playground is going to go there. In this particular case, Oak Park is a very woody park, and so the design that we went with most recently for this one is a log cabin style. It applies to the site well. It blends in with it and makes it kind of an attractive part of the park. There are specialty designs. You'll see here 3 photographs. A splash pad, sometimes called a zero-depth playground, is fairly common. It's more common in hotter parts of the state, inland, where they really need some cool play opportunities. But they do happen in coastal communities, and we are in very preliminary stages of perhaps thinking about doing one of those at Los Baños. It seems like it's an appropriate place and has already the infrastructure necessary to do it, so we're happy to be trying that project out. The young lady on a mushroom, it's become quite a regular occurrence now for playgrounds to be sculpted and to really mimic the natural environment more so than being decks and posts and shades. That's sculpted out of concrete. They can be done custom, anything you want, or you buy them out of a catalog, and they can be an entire playground, can be looking like there's logs and trees and rocks, or you can just use them as part of a regular playground. They've become very, very popular as of late. Our third photo there is actually of a playground that's specifically designed to be more universally accessible to children of all abilities. They're generally called universally accessible playgrounds. Those tend to be in larger city centers, and they've become quite popular. They take up a fair amount of room and obviously have a lot elevated cost associated with them. However, that's been on my bucket list for some time, and I'm very excited that we're in, again, very preliminary talks with the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation for looking for a feasible spot to do a playground like that. That they're willing to provide some funding, and we might be able to get that accomplished. I would like to do that within my career. Regulation of playgrounds. Here's the cold, hard science of it. So we won't spend too much time on this. The state of California, as it is wont to do, is one of the few that's actually legislated playground regulations. Most of the country just relies on the standard of care. They rely on you following that to limit your liability in a lawsuit. And California, though, has legislated that standard. That makes for some difficulties at times because these standards are all written as voluntary guidelines. So that's always a challenge to apply these. The ADA standards for accessible design applies to playgrounds. The other 2 documents are the Consumer Product Safety Commission Public Playground Safety Handbook, and the other one that you can't see the title is American Society of Testing and Materials. They call it document F1487-11. You can tell that they're very differently written. The CPSC document is available for free at their website. It's a very good document. It's written more for the general public. It doesn't quite delve into the geometry and math and things that the ASTM document does. It is free. The ASTM does charge for their standards. If somebody were interested in following up more on playground regulations, the CPSC document is a great place to start. It's well written and gives you a good jump start on some of the regulations. And those 2 documents are referenced in California state legislation in the Health and Safety Code that they will be adhered to. The maintenance of playgrounds. As you can imagine, it's one of the places that we really focus a lot of our effort on. Each time a staff person goes by or near a playground, they will at least do a cursory check of it. They'll check for obvious problems, obvious breakage, obvious debris, and then once a month, each staff person assigned over a particular area will do a very thorough inspection. As you see Mr. Brady here on the left, checking every link in a chain to make sure it's not worn. That's really required in the regulations, and we do that really, we stay on top of that. It's important to see. Many times the wear and tear on a playground is not so easily spotted, and you have to dig into it to do it. The replacement of playgrounds. We have done a number of playground replacements in the last few years. This one, as we talked earlier, is Chase Palm Park. That is a very large playground. In fact, it's probably the largest we've replaced in my career here. Removal of it alone was quite a task. It's built like a tank. We were able to save a few small parts of that were custom built for us, meaning they were not easily replaced, and we were able to build around them. But this one was replaced with the same shipwreck theme, same custom colors that were originally put in. The only difference is in the foreground was originally a wooden playground that didn't fare very well when the park was originally put in, and so we replaced it with another boat to keep with the shipwreck theme. That's a very popular playground. In particular, what we call the gangway climber is almost always packed with children waiting in line to go up and down it. East Beach. We recently replaced East Beach. This, as you can imagine, has some particular concerns and issues with it. It's effectively right on the beach. It can be pummeled quite a bit by storms, by salt water, by spray. And so when we replaced it, we actually went with a company that's one of the few remaining that does hot dip galvanized playgrounds. I'm sure most of you have played on playgrounds as a child, and probably a large amount of them were just original hot dip monkey bars, galvanized metal. They stood up really well to wear and tear, and this company still produces ones like that. And I checked it just today because we had a meeting down there, and there's not a spot of rust on it. It's been in for quite some time now. So we're very happy that it's going along. We also designed it to not be visually heavy, because this is obviously an important aesthetic area, so we didn't want it to really stand out in crazy weights or colors. And we also designed it to be fairly easy to see through, as this area sometimes has some issues with people camping out or sleeping in and around the playground. This playground is easy to see through from the parking lot for law enforcement. Bonnet Park, we just recently did this one. This was an opportunity to do a little more color. Oftentimes we have to restrain our color choices because of the aesthetics of the park, because a lot of people see it. Bonnet Park, being down in a small valley right along a creek and not quite so visible, was an opportunity for us to go with a little more color. We actually chose these colors based on the colors of the murals painted on the Boys and Girls Club and the restroom. Considering that this is right near a creek, we also decided to, for the first time ever, to do a pattern in our surfacing and added a little creek surfacing there. It's a very popular playground. Gets a lot of use. It's one of the few on the west side, and so it's an important spot. So we made it a little bit bigger, a little bit nicer, a little bit brighter colored. Bath Street Pocket Park, we recently did. That wasn't so much a replacement as a new installation. I know some of you were there during the ribbon cutting. This one is obviously an example where effectively the playground is the park. It's the centerpiece of it there. It was actually a bit of a design challenge for being so small to try and fit it into the space that was allotted and provide a little bit of play value. But I think it's a very nice design. It seems to be popular, it's aesthetically pleasing, and now we just hope to get a lot of neighborhood kids to come in and play on it and to use it. We did also, we have a new playground in early stages of planning that we hope comes to fruition, and that's at the Muni Tennis Courts. I'm sure you guys know of that project. It is already fairly well planned out. Now we're just in the process of trying to push that project through. It's another area where there's very few playgrounds for the children who live in the neighborhood, and it was a perfect place to make use of some of that parking lot. So we're happy to be putting that in as well. Renovation. You don't generally renovate playgrounds. You usually replace them. However, Kids World is very much a unique property. And so this one, we're going through a renovation process. It's an extremely large playground, even larger than the one at Chase Palm Park. It's very unique. The company that builds these still builds them, but they don't build them anywhere near this size anymore due to changes in materials. This one is fared pretty well from a durability standpoint. However, there are a few issues of wear and tear, as well as a few regulatory issues that it no longer conforms to. And so we've decided to go through and do a fairly good refurbishment. It's our hope that when we're done, you won't notice a whole lot of change, but that it will be a little more sturdy and perhaps a little closer in compliance. And I believe that is it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have questions for Mr. Brown? Yes, Mr. Lesnar Buxton.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I get a lot of calls in my office about kids' ward and accessibility. Will the renovation cover accessibility issues?
Accessibility issues regarding the new playground or other playgrounds as well? Kids World. Kids World, obviously, when it was built and designed, it conformed to all of the regulations at the time. That was 1993. They've changed substantially right now. There was accessibility issues designed into Kids World. They're not as vigorous as they are now with new playgrounds. The refurbishment will make some changes in that manner. It's not going to be able to deal with the entire playground. Much of the playground is simply isolated and not accessible no matter what you do to it, mostly the upper story. However, the new refurbishment will add pathways of travel, port-in-place rubber to make it easier for those with mobility impairments to get around. It will also work on some of the transfer points and make it easier for people to get out of mobility devices and get onto the playground. And we will be refurbishing some of the tactile, sensory type of areas in the playground as well. So while we would like to, of course, make the entire playground a universally accessible one, it's just not going to lend itself to that. And yet it's unique enough that we wanted to try and keep the look of it going. So we're doing as much as we can, and they've come up with some very, very unique and useful design features to try and make it more accessible.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Yes, it is hard to work within that context and keep the specialness, because that was a gift to the city. I mean, so many people worked on it. They have ownership of it. Other comments and questions? I know that the city does a lot, and it's so, and I hope we keep it well into the future, but having the dedicated playground replacement funding makes a huge difference, where we're not fighting every year to keep it in the budget. And I think it's so important, and it's kept us up to date. When you look at the list of when our playgrounds have been redone, it's nice to see that they're all within human memory.
Indeed, Chair Longstreet, we've replaced almost every playground with the exception of Kids World in the time that I've been with the city. And both the commission in its support and council in its dedication of funding have been very generous to keep us on top of that. And,
yes.
and we're very happy for that. There's nothing worse than trying to decide whether a playground, whether you have the money to replace a playground or whether you're going to have to take it out of service. And so far, the city has done very well in supporting its playgrounds.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much. And that brings us to our drought response plan update and water rate impacts. Unfortunately, not as happy a topic as the last one.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioners, I have Mandy Burgess, Administrative Analyst, and Mark School, Business Manager, are going to present the report to you today. You might ask, why are we talking about it? Because since we had so much rain. If you have extra time, the Public Works Department did an excellent presentation to Council yesterday talking about where we are with drought and water. And no, we're not out of the drought, and we still have more to do. The department's had a drought response plan in place since June 2014. We're now January 2017. It's a good opportunity to update you on what we've achieved, and then also talk a little bit about where we think we'll be going forward, because irrespective of whether the drought is over and or when the new desal plant comes online, we're facing issues we weren't facing in 2013, and that has to do primarily with the cost of water. So this feeds into more of your future discussion about budget and the different issues that we're grappling with. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. Mandy Burgess. Jill gave a great introduction, so I'm just going to dive right in. And bear with me. I'm going to try to give enough information for our new commissioners while still keeping the pace. So with this presentation, we'll look quickly at some of the key dates, and as the drought progressed and those conservation measures, we'll look at how the department used water in 2015 compared to the baseline year of 2013. Our conservation achievements, and then I'm going to pass it over to Mark, and he'll discuss some of the rate increases and those fiscal considerations. So we have up here some of those key dates. February 2014, the Stage 1 drought was declared, and that included voluntary conservation measures. Soon after, in May, Stage 2 was declared, and that was mandatory conservation of 20%. At that point, our department had already begun implementing actions to conserve water, developing the drought response plan, and that was finalized in June of 2014. May 2015, Stage 3 declared, conservation increased to 25%. And then in 2016, April of 2016, the city increased the target to 35%, and then most recently in December, increased that again to 40% with the implementation of the turf watering regulations. So the Strategic Drought Plan has been and continues to be a working document for our department. It was implemented fully at the time. It continues to be implemented fully. It identifies where the department will prioritize water, and that is a combination of community need as well as our resource loss. And we continue to prioritize water for our trees, our recreated turf, that includes our programmable areas such as our sports fields, at our golf greens, and of course at our public facilities. And then we've implemented a number of conservation actions, reduced or eliminated turf watering. We've implemented upgrades to our facilities, including low-flow plumbing fixtures, reduced available showers at locations with the least public impact. We've modified some of our maintenance operations for reduced water. Communication with the public has been and will continue to be a play a key role as we move forward with the drought. And then, of course, the plan didn't end there. We continue daily and monthly monitoring our meters and make adjustments as is necessary. So this slide looks at water use in 2015. The golf course is a primary water user at 52%, primary water user for the department. But as you'll see in the table below, much of their water, 88%, comes from recycled water. The Parks Division uses 44% of the department's water to water turf and trees in our sports fields. They manage, 1,600 acres of land there. Again, a lot of the water being used from the recycled, but where you see potable water being used, it's really at our at our trees, and for our sensitive horticultural landscaping, and then for the golf course, the greens. And so a quarter of the water use is potable. Again, that's trees and our sensitive landscaping. And then Recreation Division, 4% of department water use, and this is our pools and our recreation facilities. This chart here really expands the view of where our water is used. You can see green there is potable, and it lists park trees and turf as the majority of the potable water use, followed by golf, and it works its way down to drinking fountains. And I think this chart also really illustrates our limitations. There are not a variety of areas that we can use our recycled water, and we will continue to use that to its maximum. Fortunately, we're poised because we have the infrastructure there to use recycled water. But as we continue to, or if there is a need for additional potable water conservation, you can see that it's really going to be a significant impact either to the public or to our natural resources. So this is just looking at how we ended 2015. Again, the baseline, comparing it to the baseline year of 2013. We used 134 million gallons in 2013 as compared to 104 million gallons in 2015. This chart looks at both potable and recycled water, and we ended the year conserving 23% or 30 million gallons. I do want to mention and remind ourselves that in 2015 the recycled water plant was down, and water moving through those pipes was potable water, and therefore the department really pulled back, not wanting to be a drain on that system. And in fact, we had reached 29% conservation by September. When the recycle plant came back on, we increased our recycled water use, and that's what you're seeing here is an increased use of recycled water, such that we ended the year 23%. So I'll quickly look at some of our division conservation savings. The Parks Division ended 2015 with a 28% savings. This is largely due to turf irrigation reductions. 9 of our parks were slated or categorized for no change. These include our sports fields like Dwight Murphy, Pershing Park, Rio Ball Field. In fact, we conserved 28% of the water there. And again, that's in large part due to the fact that the recycled water, where we would use recycled water at some of these areas, it was in fact potable at that time. So we were making conservation efforts there. The vast majority of our parks are in that 20 to 30% turf reduction, and in fact, we conserved 33% there. And then we have turf where irrigation was turned off completely, the Orpitz, City Hall, and others. But they still have trees and some sensitive landscaping there that we watered. So we ended in those parks conserving 66% again, and that was specific to our trees and our horticultural landscaping. We have 2 fountains that were turned off. Let me turn that page, excuse me. A.C. Postel Memorial Garden and Chase Palm Park. Chase Palm Park was planted with drought-tolerant landscaping, so that still remains. We have 2 ponds as well, Chase Palm and Alice Cup Memorial Garden. There has been no change in those ponds. They are still there and functioning. And as I mentioned, outreach, the department fairly early on initiated the Gold is the New Green campaign. That included web and social media updates and signage within our parks to notify the public that you would see some changes in our parks and where we use recycled water as well. Street tree irrigation is an area where you'll see increased use of water. We went from 249,000 gallons in 2013 to 415,000 gallons in 2015. The department had prioritized 600 trees to be watered, and these were the vast majority, 524, being young trees still establishing their root system, needed that water. We also had our stone pines along Anapamu Street, and then a number of species-specific trees that just aren't from the area or more of a temperate climate tree, and they require water, and we didn't want to lose those. The department was also able to expand its efforts and water an additional 2,500 trees at a less frequent basis, and that was in large part due to the implementation of water-efficient devices, really. So 250 slow-release bags. We have the Irricades on Anapamu Street, which water the stone pines there. And then we also purchased an additional trailer so that now the department has 1 water truck and 2 water trailers to help maintain that. Street tree maintenance and planting. There's a slight uptick in removals, but it's hard to say whether or not these are due to the drought or not, and I think this is something our department will continue to keep tabs on, and we may see the effects of the drought long after the drought is over on our trees. So it's just something we're going to have to keep tabs on for now. Our street tree planting program did cease. We haven't had any new plantings there. We've reduced our pruning where trees show signs of drought stress. In some cases, trees that are healthy and doing just fine, there's no change in the pruning there. Mulch is used where we can to reduce the evaporation. Outreach for Our Trees has been approached both broadly and through targeted efforts. Early in the drought, we sent a citywide mailer, postcard, soliciting support for street tree watering, offering tips on how to water a tree, and as well as our contact information and what a drought-stressed tree looks like. Then we followed that up with some targeted efforts to residents along the Anapamu Street, adjacent to the Stone Pines, and private property residents where historic and specimen trees exist. Most recently, we're working with the Water Resources Department, and you'll see this flyer here. As they have implemented the turf watering ban, we want to remind private residents that they can and should continue to water their private tree, how to do that, where to do that, and assistance if needed. I think that department will move forward with some public workshops in the coming months. If we are invited to participate in that, we'll certainly keep the commission abreast of that. Recycled water has been a topic not only for trees but also for greens on the golf course and other landscaping. And we are not using recycled water, and really it boils down to what we're watering is already so drought stressed and so sensitive, and the solids and the salts that are in the recycled water are just at a level that it just doesn't make sense to risk the loss of those resources by using recycled water. But that has been a topic. So the Recreation Division conserved 25% mainly through modified operations. There was a pool cover purchased for Ortega Pool. Los Baños already had a pool cover, and then we have 2 waiting pools, one of which is down. West Beach Wedding Pool is not operable at this time. And then Oak Park is seasonally drained, and so it didn't require one. Backwash frequencies changed just to reduce water use, but maintain pool safety and presentation. Blowers are used for maintenance instead of power washers. You'll see that at the tennis courts as well. And then, of course, all pool repairs are fixed, so no pool leaks or anything going on there. Showers have been reduced at some of our facilities, and all of our facilities where showers are functioning have low-flow shower heads. So we've implemented a 50% reduction of showers at the Cabrillo Bathhouse. East Beach outdoor shower is off, although the foot wash remains on. Muni tennis showers are off. Carrillo Gym and the pool are on. I mentioned tennis court maintenance with the blowers and spot cleaning, reduced washing of recreation vans, and then outreach has been really targeted to facility users. So, for example, signs up at our shower facilities limiting shower use, information provided to renters of our facilities, notifying them of water conservation efforts, and then signage at our gardens about when to water. I think that ends me. I'm going to pass it over to Mark for golf and rate increases.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Mark Sewell. I'm the business manager responsible for the golf division. So I can echo many of the things that Ms. Burgess has already talked about in terms of the golf course's response to the drought. It does use most of the water for the department, but it's worth repeating that 88-90% of that water is recycled, therefore has no impact with regards to the use of potable water and therefore the drought. So in 2015, the year ended with 20% savings, and again it's worth mentioning that we were monitoring this on a weekly and monthly basis, and as soon as that recycled plant came back online, we started to use that water. We desperately needed it. I don't know if any of you remember driving down Las Positas, or even if you played golf in 2015 at Muni, you will have noticed that there were some very, very significantly dry areas, and that was by plan. We weren't able to use recycled water for 9 months of that year, and it really made an impact, and it had a significant revenue impact as well with regards to golfers who had alternative options elsewhere within a pretty short drive who weren't conserving water to the same extent that we were. So we had to maintain green irrigation. They are the prime assets, and they are also the most finicky and challenging parts of a golf course to maintain, requires potable water. There's nothing we can do about that at this point, given the makeup of the recycled water. So we maintained that at the previous levels, and we're able to make the savings by cutting back elsewhere. We reduced the rough areas in the first 100 yards, typically where a golfer wouldn't hopefully have to play too many shots. And it depends on your skill level, of course. And then also within the restaurant, we've complied with the regulations to make sure that we only serve water upon request. And reduced our power washing and all the other things that you would think would be sensible steps, although they sometimes have more of a signalling effect than they do actually a significant impact on the amount of water that is saved. So moving on from the actual amount of water that we've saved, we are now in a situation that many of the residents of the city of Santa Barbara find themselves in, and that they're now facing significantly higher water bills for a couple of reasons. One is that there's a kind of a, hey, we'd really need you to conserve the amount of water you're using, and here's a bit of a stick to do that with. And the second part is that now it's costing the city of Santa Barbara significantly more to actually supply us the water for many reasons. One of the key areas of that, of course, was that rates last year increased between 30 and 40% to do with the desalination plant and making sure that the Water Resources Department was able to fund that through rates. And so we are not immune to that. The City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department does not get any different pricing than any other private customer. It's not like we get free water. And so what we're seeing of that is that it's taken a significantly more increased portion of our annual budget. So just to give you some of the detail, I don't want to spend too long on this because I can see that, it's been a long meeting, but it's important to just realize that we do have 124 meters in our department of various shapes and sizes, from, little pipes that come in that give you tap water to significantly large ones that allow you to irrigate 100 acres in an evening. And the point I wanted to make in terms of sharing that with you is how the fixed cost in our department now has increased significantly over the last few years. And that's what this chart shows you. So even if we didn't do any watering at all, we now have a situation where we're spending $250,000 a year just to have the right to water, just to have the meters. Now, again, that's no different to any other person in the community, but it's worth making that point because it's not free. It is part of our budget. We have to find ways to fund that. And so you'll see there that it's 85% on average since 2013. And we don't know yet what the increases on those fees are going to be in the future years, but they could be fairly significant. So then moving over to in terms of, what happens in terms of when we do start to use water? You see here that the cheapest water that the department uses is recycled water. There's an agreement in place that recycled water is capped at 80% at the lowest potable rate for irrigation customers, okay? But that's still increased 53%. So the irony here, of course, is that recycled water use doesn't have any impact on drought, but the fee has gone up 53%. Now, I would state that the recycled water we receive is somewhat subsidized, so that's not, again, a plea here that says we shouldn't be paying these fees. It's just stating the impact to our budget. And what you also see there, of course, is that the potable irrigation has gone up in step, 53%, and is a significant impact to our budget. The second line on the table, the Tier 2, thankfully, because it's gone up almost fourfold, thankfully we don't have many areas in our network where we reach Tier 2. Tier 2 is basically set by the water department as a measure for saying, okay, we think based on your operation and your averages over time, you're probably using more water than you've done in the past, and therefore there's a kind of a punitive charging mechanism for that. And so therefore, luckily, we don't really see too much of that impacting us. So our rates that we're seeing go up like that are against a backdrop of declining water volume. So the line is the water volume. You can see that declining, and you can see the bars are actually increasing. And that's not a measure of us using excess water. That's actually a measure of us saving water, but it's just those factors of price increases. And so, again, another way of really showing that, and where does this rubber hit the road in terms of our department? Well, our budget this year for the full department is $850,000, give or take. That's how much the department spends on water. And so even if the drought were over tomorrow and the need to irrigate was similar to 2013, which, by the way, there were still areas where we perhaps weren't at 100% for fiscal reasons, But even if the drought was away tomorrow, we would struggle to afford the cost of the water on today's rates because we would need to have more than $1 million to spend on water for our department. And so what we see on the second pie chart there is that in reality, we can pay and afford to pay for the amount of water that we've used in 2015 at current rates. But of course, 2015 was at a conservation level, and was a conservation level that was based on conserving water that was coming through the recycled pipes, because at that point it was potable. So from a fiscal standpoint, we have a significant challenge to increase our irrigation, even for recycled water, to the levels that we were at prior to the city required conservation targets. So where does that leave us? Well, you know, even though I felt like I've been back in England for the last month, with all the rain that we've been having, which has been wonderful, the drought is significant. I think one of the things I've taken away from Mr. Hagmark, who's the Water Resources Manager recently, was stating that although we've had this rain and everyone's feeling it's wonderful and it's great news, Kachuma is still lower, significantly so, than this time last year. So we are still in a significant drought. We don't have any water to waste. We are now, thankfully, back using recycled water, and we will continue to prioritise the trees, the recreated parks, and the golf greens. Our strategy is working, and so we continue to use our strategy. So we have a budget impact regardless of whether the drought is going to continue or not. And we're going to have to continue to look at the fiscal impact as well as the water conservation impact as we go forward. That's it. And that concludes our presentation. If I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Ms. Barger? Yes.
The only question I have is, do you expect the water rates to go back down if we do come out of the drought?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Armbruster, welcome.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Armbruster, it's unlikely that water rates are going to change in the near future. The cost of producing the water and the delivering the water are likely to, well, I don't know where they're going to go, but it's a constant challenge for the Public Works Department. As you can imagine, developing new infrastructure requires resources, and then the cost to actually deliver that water requires resources. We sort of consider it's a fact of life, and it's where we are today in Santa Barbara because we need a reliable source of water. What we do and can continue to do is we look at ways in which to increase the efficiency of our irrigation. So in our capital program, for example, we have irrigation replacement projects. In some cases, if we can replace irrigation in certain parks, we can reduce our water use yet still achieve the watering objectives that we have to maintain that park or that field for its specific use. You also know that there is a huge effort on the part of the city to convert landscapes from turf to drought-tolerant landscapes. To some extent, we've done that as a department. In some cases, it doesn't make sense to convert a sports field to a drought-tolerant landscape, so we balance that. And then also, we also look at opportunities and have over the years. The reason why we can use so much recycled water is because we've worked closely with Public Works Department that when that, it's a separate set of pipes, so it's a whole additional infrastructure that we tie into that infrastructure to take the pressure off the potable water system. So we don't know where they're going to go. Chances are it's where we are today, and it's what the community has decided it needs to do to have a guaranteed source of water.
Other questions? I had a question about the recycled water. Is there any hope of the composition changing so that we're able to use it more on trees and not have the effects that were stated in the report?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I don't know that any of us here are really qualified to answer that question well. I can say at the department level, and I would be happy to report back from the Public Works Department, we've looked at, well, how could you perhaps do additional treatment to use water in certain areas? A prime example is the bird refuge. It was almost dry until a few weeks ago. over the years, the city and the department in particular has struggled with all sorts of issues at the bird refuge, and odors is the easiest way to capture them all. At times, we've put potable water in that lake to try to address odors. Long time ago, I actually thought recycled water was a good idea, and it's not because of the high salt content and the high levels of
boron,
fertilizer, nitrates, excuse me. So we've often thought, well, gosh, if there was some way to treat more of that water, then we could use it as a reliable source there. I think we're always open to the question and the discussion. Ultimately, I don't know whether we'll get there, and I would ask the Public Works Department really to come back with more technical information for you on that.
I guess since they've just redone that whole system, I would assume it's up to the standards of the best standards they could.
That's correct.
Do correct now. Okay. Any other questions or comments? And this, this amount of money has a huge impact on our budget. We'll deal with it, I guess. But it's thank you for all the work, both in the drought and in drought planning and projecting where we're going with this. I know that it hasn't been easy, and it's done well for us, as well as we can expect. Let's hope it keeps raining this season. And thank you. All right. I think we're done with that. Now we have we move on to the Santa Barbara. Let me ask first, does anybody need a brief couple of minute break, or are we ready to go through? Okay, then we will continue on. Okay.
Chair, sorry, I apologize.
Oh, no,
Chair
on.
Longstreet, Commissioners, realizing that you've been focused for almost 2 hours now, we can speed right through this presentation. You have a pocket map up on the dais that we've given you. Mandy Burgess is going to do this presentation. I would just like to briefly add, a lot of people made this project possible. We had an intern, Alina Worth, who did a lot of the research. We worked closely with other staff in our department. Summers Case helped with sort of the initial layout, and then ultimately the printer took on the map component. We also worked with City TV, so if you see the video online. And we reached out and asked experts in Santa Barbara to be part of podcasts and interviews. So really it's a community effort. Mandy will walk through the aspects of the project, because the Z-Card, the coastal map, is just one component of it. And then I'd also add, and I think Mandy can update as well, I think out of the 5,000 we printed, we've distributed 1,000 already, and it's only been on the street for 2 weeks. So they're being consumed, so we consider it a success so far.
Okay, thank you. I was going to introduce this with my appreciations to the public as well, but I'll just know that I follow Jill's footsteps right there. So this was a great project, not only fun to work on for myself. I learned a lot, and I certainly hope that our residents and visitors who get a hold of these tools will have as much fun exploring the coast and learning about the coast as well. So this is the Coastal Education and Outreach Project. It was a great project and an opportunity for our department to share Santa Barbara's history and celebrate that we have a very accessible coast, which is unique to Southern California, and that our coast has a lot to offer. And many may not know that our coast was once a largely isolated area prior to the development of the wharf and the harbor and the the rail system, and that it really evolved. It was a destination for the wealthy as well, but it really evolved to a cornerstone for the oil industry and fisheries commerce, and more recently for recreation and tourism. And that evolution happened through some pretty amazing foresight, preservation and protection on behalf of city efforts and the public philanthropy, ballot measures, and of course some of those key developments that really pushed Santa Barbara into a commercial and tourist zone. Such that today we have a very accessible coastline, 6.3 miles of coast, 60% of it in public ownership, and it's also a very diverse coast. 5 miles of beach, 3 bluff beach stair, access stairs, 12 parks, so working harbor and vibrant waterfront, 3 major creeks, 2 estuaries, recreation facilities including the bathhouse and Los Baños. And we have a unique cultural history which begins with the Chumash, and we're also uniquely positioned on the coast in our relation to the Channel Islands. And yet, despite some of this diversity and this rich history, there hasn't been a lot of comprehensive information for the general public to obtain until now. So, the department was awarded in 2014 $27,000 from a grant from the Coastal Conservancy under their Explore the Coast grant. The objectives of the project were to develop web-based tools, broaden public awareness of coastal culture, history, ecology, and start to engage the community in those climate change issues. And plus enhance the way we learn about the coast and the visitor experience. And we developed podcasts, a video and walking map as part of the project. And then all of the information that we've developed will be linked to the State Coastal Conservancy's mobile web app that they're developing. So quickly touch on what the Coastal Trail is. The Coastal Conservancies, as well as many other organizations, are aligning initiatives and programs to develop a network of trails from the Mexico-California border all the way out through to Oregon. And this is literally a physical trail. It's 60% complete, and that encompasses 700 miles. And it's intended to provide use and exploration of the coast and connect coastal communities. And then within Santa Barbara, it runs from Arroyo Barro Estuary to the Andre Clark Bird Refuge, and includes multi-use paths, dirt trails through Douglas Family Preserve, and streets through some of our neighborhoods. So the project initiated with some research. We looked through UCSB files, the Santa Barbara Historical Museum, of course, city files, Museum of Natural History, NOAA, and local books. We conducted interviews with geologists from UCSB, John Johnson of the Natural History Museum, local historians Mike Redman, and other city staff and others. And then we were really fortunate in acquiring some amazing imagery, some historic photos, calcoast.org, UCSB, the Maritime Museum provided several photos. We appreciate that. And then digging through city files as well. So you should have all received a map, and they're available to the public now. And this is a PDF look at that. You can see we have 11 points of interest, 11 stops along the coastal trail, starting at the Arroyo Barro Estuary, ending at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. The map also includes 3 exploratory walks. Let's see, on the back here, we provide a little bit of detail as to what you'll find at those stops. The Learn More section down at the bottom there is where you can find the link to the podcasts and video. And so as you're being guided along the coast and to these stops with the map, you can stop at one of these stops and also listen to a podcast. And so we developed 7 podcasts. The list is there. I'll spare us the list there, but they're 4 to 5 minutes long, and they really tell the story of the site. And so, for example, at Ambassador Park, it begins with highlighting the thriving Chumash community that was once in the area, their ties to the coast, and the use of those coastal resources for not only survival but for travel. Moves through to the Potter Hotel, and that hotel's influence on tourism into the area. As another example, Arroyo Burro Estuary, we talk about the importance of estuaries as ecosystems. The Arroyo Burro Estuary is a buffer against flooding and sea level rise, and it has an important function as a filter for water coming down from the upper watershed. These are in MP3 format, so you can virtually listen to it from any portable device. Again, available on the city's website. And then the video is really that broad overview of the project. It really captures the breadth of the coastal trail, what it is, where it is within Santa Barbara. Some great imagery in there. Talks about, provides some examples of those coastal preservation that really add to the accessibility of our coast and the public participation that influenced the coast we have today. And again, it starts that dialogue with the public on sea level rise and the climate change issues that potentially face us, and what is being done both city and locally with UCSB and researchers to look at some of those issues. You may have heard or seen some of our public outreach that we've been doing. We've updated our website. We have an Explore the Coast page where you can find this map. It's in downloadable version, access the podcasts, watch the video. We've done some social media updates, city newsletter. You may have heard Ms. Zachary on KCLU this past Monday. And then we've distributed our maps, the video was also shown last year actually on Channel 18 Inside Santa Barbara, and they're looking to see when they can air that again. And then we've actually distributed 2,000 maps plus. They're at all of our department facilities, our recreation facilities, the Central Library, Santa Barbara Maritime Museum, Visitor Center, City Hall, to name a few. So, next steps. So we always like to link and provide connection between some of our projects. So this is a good opportunity. This project will link to our Healthy Parks, Healthy Trails initiative. We'll also be working with our partners at Sansom and Cottage to promote this as a kickstart to 2017 health. Maybe you can explore your coast on your self-guided walking tour. We'll be promoting these at city events like Earth Day and the Harbor Seafood Fest. And then as we move forward with our signage plan, we'll look at ways to incorporate these messages and this information on our signage, on our interpretive signage. So, and that concludes that. I hope I didn't take too long.
Excellent, excellent. It's exciting. I mean, now I want to go look at listen to the podcasts and watch the video. Are there questions or comments for Ms. Barger? Thank you very much. It's a very, I want to take a couple so I have them when guests come into town and send them off on walks. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. We have one last piece of business, and that is our advisory committee liaison appointments. I guess we've had a change in the direction we're going with this since we have 3 more spots open right now. Should we say, we found out today that Ms. Wiscombe cannot serve on both planning and Parks and Recreation. That's come down from the city attorney's office, and so those spots with her name in it are now available and in need of a liaison. So we knew she would be leaving in June, but now it's now. So as we look at these, I think we have 2 newer commissioners, 3 of you. Ms. Martinez-Cohen, you have a full plate, I believe. Are you happy with your full plate?
Yeah, I'm still working on trying to get to those meetings a little bit more regularly. I've been good at attending the Creeks one. Arts and crafts, I travel for work, and it's just been a little tough to prioritize both of them. So I would be happy to stay with mine, but I definitely could not add another one.
No. Okay, that's good to know. Ms. Armbruster.
The only one I could take over is the golf course one.
Okay.
Based on work schedule, so. I can do that.
Let's put you down for golf then.
Okay.
Ms. Clark, how are you looking on
I think street trees is interesting.
street trees? I think street trees, I know your work schedule is more flexible than some of ours, and I would appreciate it if, I think the rest of us pretty much have full day schedules. Am I right with work? Don't you, Mr. Lesnar Buxton?
I'm out in the community, so my job is wherever the community is.
Okay. We'll put Ms. Clark down for street trees right now. Is there anything you would like to take on, Mr. Lesnar Buxton?
What's open?
Well, let's look and see what we've got here. I guess we're going to need a second person for the Park Foundation at this point, and we won't have any quorum issues with that, will we?
Chair Longstreet, we do have Ed Cavazos, who's on the Park Foundation board.
Okay, so
we could leave it at that for now.
Okay.
And I would like to add, I'm sensitive to the fact that commissioners have busy schedules. To the extent you can attend these meetings would be great. There is an agenda that goes out as well, so you can also follow up with the staff member if for some reason there's a reason why you can't attend the meeting and you want to catch up or you need to prioritize your time. Just because some of these meetings, for example, the Street Tree Advisory Committee at 8:30 on the first Thursday of the month could be challenging for folks that have somewhere to be for their profession. So I understand that.
Yeah. I think we're looking pretty good right now. And if there's any thing that jumps out that anybody wants to trade or anything, let me know. As it stands, we're going to be down a commissioner until June. So if it becomes challenging and you want to give one up or something, I think in June will be a good time. We'll revisit this. Right? Is everybody okay now? Because you've been attending the Neighborhood Advisory Council, and I think that's a good, I appreciate that, having your voice there. Okay. With that, I think we have concluded our meeting. I would like to say thank you to Ms. Wiscombe for her years as the chair and her service, and she will be missed on the commission. So thank you for all of that. And with that, we'll adjourn.